Hello, this is Professor Keith Ross from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. This is another in a series of lectures for my students. This lecture is going to be for my police studies students. This is chapter 6, entitled Police Subculture. So this chapter sort of starts with some definitions, and we have some preconceived ideas of what police subculture is: the thin blue line, the blue wall of silence. Police go to cop bars, cop hangouts, things like that. Um, and we sort of want to get some definitions so we can understand what this all means. So, the definition, and this is testable, the definition for the term culture refers to a shared set of values, norms, and behaviors that form a particular way of life. Now, we all have differing cultures, but we're all, let's say, part of the American culture. So maybe some of the norms and values of the American culture is that if you go to college and you work hard, you'll get those things that you desire, that you'll get the family with the 2.3 children, the house with the white picket fence, the trophy dog, all of that. So we have that definition for culture. Inside of that, there are two other definitions that I'd like you all to know. Values are standards of goodness or things that are perceived to be important, and norms refers to rules and expectations about which forms of behavior are acceptable and which are not. So everyone that I'm talking to is at least part of the American culture, but even more specifically, my students are all part of the CUNY, or City University of New York, culture. So there are some values there. One of the values, let's just say, is that you're going to do your own work and you're going to put your best foot forward in the work that you do submit. Norms, so those are the values of CUNY. Some of the norms are rules and expectations. My expectations of all of you is that you do your own work, that you don't commit plagiarism, utilizing someone else's work without citations. You all have some norms about me, that I am your professor, that I'm going to either come to class or come to these lectures prepared to teach whatever chapter it is. So this is sort of this idea of cultures, values, and norms. Now, since we have the term culture, there's yet another definition. This is subculture. So culture is sort of this big balloon term, and within it, there can be subcultures. So subcultures refers to cultural patterns that distinguish some segment of a society's population from the rest of the population. So let's just say we have CUNY student culture. Now, maybe within that, there are various subcultures. Let's say let's say people that subscribe to goth subculture. So there are norms and values within that. So you're a CUNY student, you're a goth CUNY student. So your culture is CUNY, the subculture is goth CUNY, something to that effect. Individuals who share values and norms that differ from those of the larger culture society can be said to be members of a subculture. Cultures are characterized by themes or shared commonalities. So all of you have some shared commonalities. You take your studies pretty serious. You do the work that is assigned to you. You do it to the best of your knowledge, given the time and circumstances that you're dealing with. Individuals contribute and blend themes to create and to inform culture. So here's the example that I wrote. Immigrants come and contribute ideas from their culture that become incorporated into the paradigms of the new society culture that they are settling into. Heterogeneous or different ideas become homogenized, same or similar ideas within the culture. For this, I tend to like using food. Pizza. Pizza is of Italian origin. Now, depending on who you talk to, some people will say it was created in New York, some people will say it was created in Sicily, but no one can deny the origins of pizza is Italian. But most of us who enjoy pizza, when you go order pizza, you're probably not thinking to yourself, I think I'm going to enjoy some Italian pizza today. You're thinking, I'm going to enjoy pizza today. So, this heterogeneous idea, Italian pizza or Italian food, was brought into this American culture and it became homogenized, meaning that we all enjoy it to the point that it's become part of our culture. Uh, Apple pie. Apple pie is as American as you can get. However, its origins are not in America; they are in Europe. So, just sort of interesting ideas. Institutional values are values that share a sense of agreement within a particular culture on how to maintain values and accomplish objectives. So CUNY has some institutional values. They have institutional values for the students that if we were in the brick and mortar institution that you're expected to come to class, you're expected to come to class prepared, you're expected to do the assignments that your professor assigns in a timely manner, and there are institutional values for me. I'm If I am assigned a class, I am supposed to appear at that class without some sort of extenuating circumstance. I'm supposed to come prepared, and I'm supposed to teach what I said I'm going to teach. It wouldn't be fair if we were in the institution and I said, let's say in a Blackboard message last week, we're going to do police subculture, and then I walk in and look at all of you guys and say, you know what, I'm not prepared. Let's just talk use of force. It wouldn't be fair because it shows that I'm not prepared, and rightly for all of you, that's a later chapter. So how could you be prepared? How could you know that I wasn't willing to talk about police subculture today? So we'll just do use of force. So there are institutional values there. Now, in law enforcement agencies, they have their own sort of institutional values. As stated in a previous chapter, chapter 4, it is a closed hierarchical structure, meaning it goes from the top down. And there is this chain of command. We've talked about that in chapter 4 as well. That if I need something, I'm supposed to go to my immediate supervisor, whether I'm friends with this person, whether I'm not. My squad sergeant or my immediate supervisor is supposed to be the one that addresses my issues. Paramilitary, and again, that works hand in hand with the chain of command. Uh, let's say I'm a police officer and I'm good friends with my commanding officer. In theory, I want a day off. I am supposed to follow the chain of command and go to my immediate supervisor. What I'm not supposed to do is skip up to my best friend who's the commanding officer and say, hey, listen, I need the day off. Oh, sure, Keith, it's fine. A rigid bureaucratic structure, uh, at least in the NYPD, the procedural manual, the patrol guide is 2,400 pages long. And those are a list of procedures that you must abide by. If I'm going to, let's say, a DOA job, a dead on arrival job, there is a strict procedure that I am supposed to follow. I can't just look at it and say, hey, I see dead people. I've seen enough. Goodbye. That doesn't work. I have to follow the procedure. I'm going to have to get an ambulance there. I'm going to have to get a supervisor or the patrol supervisor there. I'm going to have to contact the local detective squad, all of this stuff. And the procedure is really laid out fairly well. Enforce discipline, personal responsibility. I'm supposed to come to work on time. I'm supposed to, if I respond to a job, go to that job. If there's paperwork, I'm supposed to fill out that paperwork in a timely manner. If I choose to not do it, I didn't feel like doing it, well, I'm going to have to face a consequence for that action. And that consequence is going to be discipline. Probably what's going to happen, at least in the NYPD, I'll either be written up as a minor violation, or more likely it'll be what's called a command discipline, which is an official disciplinary notice where I could be warned and admonished up to actually losing vacation days. Now, for those of you that might think, well, losing vacation days isn't really a thing. Well, it really is a thing because those vacation days are worth actual money. So you're taking money away. So it behooves me to follow the protocols and follow the procedures. And then this idea of personal integrity. Within law enforcement, let's say I arrest a drug dealer. I arrest him for criminal sale of a controlled substance. This is going to be a felony, and he has $3,000 on him in his pocket. Well, me having integrity, and we define integrity as doing the right thing when no one's looking. If he has $3,000, what I'm going to do is when I bring him back to the precinct, I'm going to invoice or inventory $3,000. I'm not going to say to myself, well, he has $3,000. This is dirty money. He's never going to miss it. And I should reward myself for getting this bad guy off the street by taking $1,000 of that. That's not integrity. As a matter of fact, what that's called corruption. So integrity, doing the right thing when no one's looking, corruption, doing the wrong thing when no one's looking. Emotional expression can be defined as the mode of expression and or the delivering ideas that define and reflect that culture's shared norms and values. I'm not going to really talk too much about this. I think that there are numerous examples of what's going on in the United States of America this very week as to how emotions are being expressed. Law enforcement agencies, the use of war stories to sort of bolster ego. These stand to build and reinforce cultural beliefs, archetypes, which are ideas and preferences. So a lot of times you'll hear police officers talking about, well, how many arrests they made. Well, the reason why they say that is because the more arrests you made, the more it looks like you did the job. Some organizational factors. So now really, most police departments are sort of in alignment with this with what I'm going to talk about, but really I'm talking about specifically the NYPD. So the NYPD, uniformed members of the service, sworn police officers, work what's called 8 hours and 35 minutes. I know the 35 minutes sounds weird. We can just say that they work 8 hours, but they technically, if they are on a quote unquote patrol chart, work 8 hours, 35 minutes. If they're on an administrative chart, they work 8 hours and 23 minutes. It gets even more complicated. But the NYPD has, or at least used to have, 4 differing platoons. They would have the day tour that would work about 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. The actual, I believe, was 07:05 by 1540 hours. So there's where you get your 835. Then you have what's called the 4 to 12, and this is even more confusing. The 4 to 12s don't start at 4 o'clock, they start at 3 o'clock. So they work from 3 o'clock to 11 p.m., actually 1500 to 2335 hours. And then you have the midnight platoon, and again, it gets complicated because the midnight platoon doesn't work at 12 midnight. They work, I believe, 11:15 to, even I get confused, I think it's 1740 or something to that effect. And there used to be a 6 to 2, a 6 p.m. or 1800 by 0235 tour. I'm not sure if they've really done away with that. But the NYPD has 3 different squads that perform rotating tours. So we have that day tour that works 7 to 3s. We have the 4 to 12s that work 3 to 11. We have the midnight platoon that works 11 to 7. And there's overlap between all 3 squads. There's overlap between the day tour and the 4 to 12. There's overlap between the 4 to 12 and the midnights. Then there's overlap between the midnight and the day tour, and so on and so on. The NYPD has 3 different squads, though. So if you are working typical patrol, you work 5 days on, then you get 2 days off. Then you work 5 days on, and then you get 3 days off. So this is what's called a rotating chart. So let's say I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now I'm off Saturday, Sunday. Now I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now I'm off Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Now I work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm off Sunday, Monday, and so on and so on. There are other units, personnel, that work with steady days off. So instead of working this 5-2-5-3 chart, they actually work 5-2-5-2. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, off Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, off Saturday, Sunday. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, that doesn't sound fair. It sounds like if you work a steady chart, you work more days than their patrol companions or patrol colleagues. It's true you work more days on, but you get more days off. You get what's called chart days. So if you're working a patrol chart and you work a 5-2-5-2, you get on top of your vacation days, you get 18 what's called chart days a year. There are numerous moments where the free flow of information does not seep into the different platoons and squads. Well, what this is talking about is, let's say I work the day tour, so I work 7 to 3. Now, again, there's going to be some overlap between my tour and the 4 to 12, which might be coming in. But even though there's that overlap, is there really a chance to talk and say, well, listen, on my tour, I got 3 robbery complaints on or about 21st Street and anywhere between 34th Avenue and 36th Avenue. They came in anywhere from about 10 o'clock in the morning to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So this free flow of information, me informing someone on that 4 to 12 squad that this is what I had been dealing with, sometimes and very, very often doesn't happen. The street environment. Policing is more than just laws and rules and procedures. Policing is the art of dealing with people in stressful situations. For those of you, most of you are criminal justice majors or somewhere in criminal justice. Criminal justice falls under sociology. What is sociology? The study of people. It's not just enough to be able to spit out that Penal Law 120 is assault in the 3rd degree. It's not good enough to spit out, well, I can tell you what Patrol Guide Procedure 21203 is. You need to be able to deal with people, because what police do is they deal with people every day. And more often than not only are they not just dealing with people, but a lot of times if someone is calling 911, it's not that they want to talk to a cop and have a cup of coffee. This person is in crisis. So not only are you dealing with people, but you're dealing with people in crisis. And what they talk about is what good police officers do, and the overwhelming majority do this on a day-to-day basis and do it well, is that they de-escalate these situations. Different situations that police encounter with the street environment help to shape younger officers and reinforce with veteran officers attitudes concerning the public and the administration bureaucracy that they deal with and are an unwitting part of sometimes. So police officers run the gamut of calls that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. This could be just the most mundane 1010 noise complaint up until let's say 1034 felonious assault jobs, homicide jobs, things like that. Domestic violence calls, child abuse calls, sex crimes calls, violent felony calls. And also, one of the things to think about is that in a community, does everybody call the police every day? And the answer to that is no. Most people go about their day-to-day business without any sort of police involvement or police intrusion in their life. So there are plenty of people, probably about 90% of the community, that have never really had to have police come over to their house. So the people that do call tend to be sort of repeat callers. So police start basically dealing with, let's say, 10% of the community. Now, an issue to think about, at least, is that if you're dealing with just 10% of a community and you're dealing with them on a day-to-day basis, do police start drawing stereotypes that, well, these are the people I deal with, they must all be like that. Whether this is true or fallacious doesn't matter. This stereotype gets either introduced to younger officers or reinforced in more veteran officers. Administration. At the beginning of a tour, a superior officer, usually either a sergeant or a lieutenant, will conduct what's called a roll call. Roll call takes place normally in a muster room. So this is a room separate where police line up, they stand at attention, and they receive their assignments for the day. Let's say Ross and whoever my partner is, you have Sector Charlie David Eddie today, and I'm going to know where the confines of Sector Charlie, Sector David, and Sector Eddie. That's Sector C, D, and E. Special conditions within the post. Is there a robbery condition, a burglary condition, an assault condition, a truancy condition? Could be anything like that within their post that must be addressed, as well as going ons in the precinct. Again, pattern crimes. Has a procedure changed? Maybe on the books, smoking a joint or a marijuana cigarette in public is still illegal. It is still a penal law misdemeanor. However, there is a patrol guide procedure that, without some sort of extenuating circumstance, usually i.e. a warrant, instead of arresting that person and putting them, quote unquote, through the system, they'll receive a criminal court summons in lieu of that arrest. Legal changes. When stop, question, and frisk was declared unconstitutional, that had to be addressed at roll calls that don't do them anymore. When that decision was overturned, that had to be addressed at roll call. Stop, question, and frisk is now back on the table. They can still be performed. And there can be times where they go over that. Maybe there is a precinct training as to how to conduct a Terry stop or a stop, question, and frisk. What exactly is reasonable suspicion? How do you articulate reasonable suspicion? How do you fill out the paperwork? Things of that nature. Other criminal justice agencies, police officers, and district attorneys. Now, most people that don't really have experience with the criminal justice system as a real reality and have just watched what they see on TV, usually think that police officers and district attorneys work really, really well in the sandbox. However, in reality, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And it really depends on the agenda. Now, police officers have an agenda. Their agenda is to effect arrests. Okay, that's all fine and well. What is the legal standard of proof necessary to effect an arrest? Well, that is probable cause. What do prosecutors do? Well, they prosecute cases. They bring cases to trial and they're looking to win. Well, what's the legal standard of proof necessary to gain a win? Well, that is beyond a reasonable doubt. So there are two different ways of looking at an incident where a person might have probably done this. Prosecutors don't work in the realm or the orbit of probably. They have to show definitively. Police officers and other law enforcement agencies. What job are you on? At least in New York, it's almost commonplace that if you work for any sort of law enforcement agency, no matter doing what, you say, I'm on the job. Well, it's incumbent on the challenging officer, the person that's, let's say, conducting this car stop, this person stop, whatever the case may be, to actually ask, well, what job is that? And can you provide me credentials? Can you show me your identification card? It's not good enough to carry just a shield because, one, shields are very easily obtainable. People lose them, people find them, and they hold on to them. The media. The media exerts considerable influence on police subculture. And I can't even begin to say how true that statement is. Police are informed by media how they're being perceived. Um, and the general public reacts to how police are being perceived through this lens of the media. And I think it's a very different perception today than it was about 20 years ago during 9/11 and its aftermath, where the perception was very, very positive, where now I would say today the perception is very, very critical. One of the things that you always have to think about when you're reading media, any sort of media, news articles, you're watching YouTube clips, you're watching TV, is that are you actually watching objective journalism? Facts for facts' sake. This is the neantwe of this incident, the when, the where, the what, how, who, and why. Or is this media being sort of filtered with a lens of obtaining more money? i.e., advertising dollars. So if you watch news programs, MSNBC, NBC, Fox, even the local news, ABC, CBS, whatever the case may be, is it strictly objective journalism, or are they in the business to make money? That the more people that tune in, the more people see advertising, the more people that buy what those products being advertised are, and then the more money that these stations can charge for advertising space on their programs. Police related shows inform police officers how to act and also sort of inform the media on how they think the police should act. Media sometimes aids in investigations, shows like America's Most Wanted. On local news stations, usually you'll see something for like Crime Stoppers, something to that effect. Police also, and when I'm talking police, I'm really not talking rank and file, I'm talking more like executive level, manipulate the media to their purposes. So, again, here's this idea. How much information do you give regarding an ongoing investigation versus the freedom of information for citizens to know what's going on? Well, it's a very fine line. It's a very thin, tight wire that has to be walked because you don't want to give every specific about an investigation. Because if I'm looking for a specific perpetrator, there are people that will call in and say, I'm the person, I did this, and this. So you want to be able to withhold some sort of salient details about this investigation to sort of filter out the people that are calling just to call and maybe the actual perpetrator. As agents of the government, police can remove the right to privacy, your Fourth Amendment protections. So police exert a major power. They exert major control over their citizens. Excuse me. They also display tools of violence if they are in uniform. Even if they're not in uniform, you sort of know who a police officer is because you'll see some of these tools of environment. Even the belt that police wear is called a gun belt. Why is it called a gun belt? Because what's on that belt? The gun. Omnipresence, or just this big presence of police officers, is a form of control. Police are in the order maintenance business, maintaining the public order, thus controlling the social environment for the collective good. That the more police officers that are out there, at least in theory, means that the less crime will be perpetrated. And if less crime is being perpetrated, more people are allowed to walk freely and feel safe and secure in their environment. Territoriality, sectors and posts can become the dominion of the officers that regularly patrol them. Sector Charlie, David, and Eddie is my sector. If something happens, I'm responsible for it. If there's an arrest or a collar to be had, that's my collar. The less crime that takes place, the less superior officers will bother. The more crime that takes place, usually what's going to happen is that the more pressure is put upon the responding sector officers to address these conditions, these issues. Positive territoriality can lead to promotions and or better assignments, and conversely, negative territoriality can lead to demotions and or worse assignments. Worse assignments could be, let's say I have childcare issues, so I need to work midnights. I need to work that 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., but I'm not doing my job. So what do? They put me on the 4 to 12, so I never see my child. This idea of use of force. The anticipation possibility of using or facing force shapes police subculture. The accoutrements of force on this gun belt, is there just a gun? No, there's not just a gun. There are other things. There is a baton. Most police officers today carry what's called a retractable baton or an asp where you flick it out and it pops open. They carry oleoresin capsicum spray, otherwise known as pepper spray. They have handcuffs. They have a radio. Government and police wage wars. We're going to declare war on crime in this city. We're going to declare war on drugs in this country. Still talking about use of force, a lot of people think they know what police can and cannot do utilizing force. I don't really want to be too topical with these lectures, but something took place in Philadelphia a couple of days ago. The person's name was Walter Wallace. He was, quote unquote, not taking his medication, and he had a knife on him. Police had responded twice. Previous to this incident, um, Mr. Wallace is alleged, and it shows on video, him charging with a knife and police officers retreating and then eventually using deadly physical force, thus killing him. So far, there's been criticism. Well, why didn't police use a taser? Why didn't they shoot him in a leg? Why were police even dispatched there? Why couldn't there have been a mental health professional? All of these are questions. I don't whether they're valid or not. We will discuss that in a later chapter. But there's this paradox of the firearm. Well, we're given a firearm, but every time it's being used, it's being questioned whether that's right or wrong. I mean, if you're going to use your firearm as a police officer, you need to know what you did, how you did it, and you're going to be able to need to articulate to a whole lot of people, your supervisor, investigating police officers, a prosecutor, possibly a judge, why you did it. So there are administrative concerns, personal concerns, and public perception. Danger, unpredictability, and suspicion. A lot of people would agree with this statement that policing is dangerous. But there are other people that will say, well, statistically, policing is not that dangerous. And I'll grant you that policing is not that dangerous, that on a day-to-day basis, most police officers don't really confront danger in their daily patrol activities. But what I would say is that police operate under the assumption that there is always the potential for danger. So the job might not be dangerous, but the job is definitely potentially dangerous. So the potential threat of danger lurks at every corner. The policing paradox. Police carry a high potential for danger. However, the actual occurrence of danger is lower. If we cannot agree on the potential of danger, we can agree on the mitigating factors of unpredictability inherent in policing. That a police officer could be standing a foot post where nothing happens for 4 hours, and then bang, something happens, some major incident. So from a resting position, now you have gone from 0 to 100 in 2.2 seconds. Unpredictability does not necessarily equate with danger, can also be bizarre incidents that take place on patrol. I have many war stories of bizarre things that I've seen on patrol. I am not going to talk about them in a video lecture. If we were in a brick and mortar, possibly. Danger plus unpredictability equals suspicion. Does a police officer's display of suspicion equate to the legal burdens of proof of founded or reasonable suspicion? If a police officer conducts this Terry stop, this stop, question, and frisk, this level 3 encounter, they are going to have to be able to articulate why they thought they had reasonable suspicion. And remember, when we're talking about reasonable suspicion, it's not a police officer's perception, it is a reasonable person's perception that given the set of circumstances at the time that it was observed, that either a felony or a penal law misdemeanor had been, is being, or was about to be committed. That has to be spelled out in order to legally satisfy the burden of proof of reasonable suspicion. The split-second syndrome, the urgency of citizen police encounters, the involuntariness of these encounters, the public setting. It's one thing to be able to watch a video clip over and over again and sort of cherry pick the facts and sort of what's called Monday morning quarterback. It is another thing entirely when you are placed in that situation, in that scenario, and you have to make that split decision, that split-second decision as to how you're going to act, what you're going to do, and more importantly, why you're doing it. This causes police officers to make quick, on-the-spot decisions. Sometimes inappropriate decisions are made, sometimes bad decisions are made. Solidarity, part of the major component of belonging to a subculture is this idea of solidarity or sticking together with one's kind. This is really called that blue wall of silence, which me personally, I think is nonsense. I think it hasn't been a thing in at least the last 10 or 15 years, maybe prior to that. there was this blue wall of silence, but not really in today's subculture of policing. Elements of this solidarity, moral superiority, well, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Common sense, however you define what common sense is. A masculine environment. A lot of times, one of the criticisms of police departments throughout the country is that they tend to look very male dominated. They look like boys' clubs. This idea of us versus them and this idea of secrecy, that we don't really talk about the job with outsiders, that I might have a couple of war stories here and there, that I'll entertain people at a party, but I don't talk about the day to day things and stuff like that. Moral agents are on a mission to protect society. This, again, this idea of moral superiority. The job is to rat out society's troublemakers. We're going to get those perps. We're going to get those skells. We're going to go get the bad guys. Dramaturgy. Cops are the good guys. Lawbreakers are the bad guys. Common sense, the lifeblood of policing. What police officers observe and how they interpret those observations, and then how do they react to the interpretation of the observation. They view danger in an often safely perceived world. A lot of times there's plenty of training that is done. One of the things when you are a police officer recruit, you train in the firearm. So you go onto the range, you actually shoot a firearm. So some people have shot a firearm, some people have never shot a firearm. There is also simulations. It's called the FATS machine. And in a later chapter, I'll show you a video of how it works. And really what it is, it's sort of this immersive screen controlled by someone that puts out a scenario. And you are a police officer interacting with basically a TV screen, and you have a firearm that's hooked up to this computer. Now, the person controlling the computer, the person controlling the scenario, can change elements of that scenario at a moment's notice. So maybe you are in some sort of confrontation with a perceived bad guy. This bad guy can continue to be a bad guy throughout the whole scenario, or the person controlling the scenario can change the bad guy into a good guy just to see how the police are going to react. And let's say they react poorly and they shoot this good guy. At least it was done in a training environment, so it's a safe environment. One, no one has actually died, and two, you can actually learn from your mistakes. The masculine environment, although the face of policing is changing, it is still male-dominated. Recruits are expected to conform. There's that idea of discipline, that you have to maintain discipline. I was an OCI, an official company instructor, so I effectively acted as a sergeant for my company or companies, usually anywhere from like 34 to 36 men and women. And I expected compliance with my orders. If I gave an order, if I told them attention, you better snap to attention, because you're going to hear from me if you don't. If I assigned homework and I'm giving you a day to do it, I expect that homework to be done. And if you don't do that homework, there is going to be some sort of punitive measure. You're going to have to redo it. Or if it didn't conform to my standards, I'd make you redo it. Female officers are also expected to conform to this male-dominated society. And one of the issues that gets raised is a female operating in a male or a masculine environment. Well, how do they operate? Do they maintain their sense of femininity, however you define that, or do they overcompensate and become part of the quote-unquote boys club? Secrecy. Information is given out on a need-to-know basis. Supervisors will give out information to police officers on a need-to-know basis. Police officers will give out information to the public on a need-to-know basis. Insulates from scrutiny from supervisors, community leaders, and media representatives. If you've ever noticed on TV, it's very, very rare that you ever see a police officer interviewed for some sort of news station. You'll see firefighters do it, but you very rarely ever see police officers do it. Well, they're actually adhering to a procedure that you're really, as a rank and file police officer, you're not supposed to talk to the media. You're supposed to allow DCPI, the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, to release statements to the media. Don't give up another cop. We're going to watch a documentary called The 7-5. And this was sort of an idea that the main protagonist, Michael Dowd, talks about not giving up another cop. Watch out for your partner, other cops, and then civilians. So there's sort of this hierarchy of secrecy. Me and my partner, I watch out for myself, number one. I watch out for my partner, number two. I watch out for other cops, number three. And at the very low end of that tier, I watch out for civilians. This is an idea. This is not something that is taught. Us versus them, a major component of police solidarity. Police have to depend on each other because if a police officer is in trouble, they rarely will call someone from the general public to assist. More often than not, most people don't want to assist. More often than not, what do people want to do? Well, they want to get out their cell phones and videotape, but they don't actually want to help. So what does the police officer do? They use their radio to radio for help. Police have to depend on each other, not the general public, to have their back and protect their well-being. Other contributing factors to this us versus them mentality. Cop families. So if you are raised in a family where, let's say, your dad, your mother, your uncle, your aunt, your grandfather, your grandmother, whatever the case were, police officers, you sort of feel like it's in your quote unquote blood. If you reside in a small town, let's say a rural area, where there's not a lot of employment opportunities or really fairly well paying opportunities, um, this might be a job for you. So upstate, there are, especially the New York State Department of Corrections employs a lot of people. The sheriffs and the local police departments employ a lot of people, some on a full-time, some on a part-time basis. One of the advantages of this is that if you live in a small town, you already have a set idea of what crime looks like, and you have sort of a set idea of what a troublemaker looks like, whether that's a stereotype or not. Prior military experience. If you have prior military experience, you've already been sort of ingrained or indoctrinated into this idea that there is this us versus them mentality, that we, the American military, are the good guys and our enemies are the bad guys, or the enemies that we perceive at that time. Other components: isolation, relationship concerns. Relationship concerns. One of the things that I do talk about is that as a police officer, you wield power. You can tell a person, a citizen, hey, come over here. And more often than not, that citizen will comply and come over. That's great power. And you start getting used to that. Well, what happens if you have a relationship? Well, do you go home and tell your significant other, hey, go get my dinner now? Well, might work, probably won't work. And then you have this issue where in my professional life, I can exert this power, but I have no power at home. Excuse me. New officers have to prove themselves. They have to prove their mettle. They have to prove that they're going to be, quote unquote, good cops. Bravery, confrontational situations, don't appear soft, be aggressive but not eager. One of the things that I always taught my police recruits is I do not have a problem with any police officer being nervous on patrol. I don't have any problem with a police officer being afraid when they go out. As we said previous in this lecture, there is a potential for danger. So I get it. I have no problem with fear. What I do have a problem with is cowardice. So if there is a confrontation with, let's say, another police officer, you can be afraid, but you still have to join the fray. If you run away, this is not the job for you, and you should really think about maybe finding some sort of alternative means of working. Last thing that I want to talk about is deception. Buy and bust operations are the pinnacle of deception. What a buy and bust operation is, you have a undercover police officer that goes into, let's say, a drug-prone location, approaches a drug dealer and says, I want a cop, a nickel bag, whatever the case may be. Now, if the drug dealer says, yo, you a cop? And then the police officer says, absolutely not, I'm not a cop. If it even gets to that point, usually it doesn't get to that point. So I'm not a cop, sell me drugs. Well, as soon as I've paid my money and I got the drugs, I walk away, and then the team comes in and then they arrest. And then this idea of testifying or noble cause corruption, where maybe you bend the truth or maybe you out and out lie on the stand. Never a good idea if you lie on the stand, if you lie on an official document, on official paperwork. They have a name for that. That name is called perjury. Perjury is punishable by incarceration. District attorneys have no problems prosecuting police officers for perjury. As a matter of fact, some careers have been made on that simple fact. Okay, well, that is about it for this chapter. I wish you guys a great day. Take care.